Welcome back. Alera?
Yes, we're going to focus now on good governance. Well, there is an Institute of Good Governance somewhere in this country, I believe. And good governance is something that we should be focusing more on because everyone complains that what we lack in this nation is good governance. So where do we go to learn this thing called good governance? Instead of dwelling on bigotry and ethnicity and stuff like that. All those need to be put in the background, and issues of Nigeria become supreme in our minds. How do we feed that sentiment to our children in mommy's breast milk so that they grow up thinking nothing than I must be good to Nigeria. Nigeria is my country. I must do good by her. That's what we're going to be talking about this morning. And to help us do that, it's my pleasure to welcome Comrade Igo Akerega, who is President of Civil Liberties Organization. Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. And we also have our runaway social commentator. Glad to see you back, Biodu Showme.
What did you catch him?
We also expect Malaki Ugumadu to join us in the course of our discussions. Now, let me begin with civil liberties, sir. How do you think we can start this good governance thing that we're talking about?
Well, basically, that appears to be a challenge, but ordinarily shouldn't be a challenge. The problem with Nigeria really about getting it right in terms of public governance and delivering the dividends of democracy to the Nigerian people, fundamentally it centers on values. If we say, for example, that you needed to be trained in a formal environment, in an institution for good governance, yes, that could be one approach to it. But I would think, as a person, that it has to do with the structures, the very foundation of the country itself. What have been the values that Nigeria as a country has been promoting since independence? The values have been warped. They have been beleaguered. We do not have a value that can, as it were, define a clear focus for public governance. That is the biggest challenge that we're having as a nation.
Okay. So, Biodo, when you talk about values, are you not really talking about the family, which seems to be the smallest unit when you talk about a society? Are those values not actually imbued in children when they're growing up?
Oh, yeah. It's more than that. When you talk about basic values, that will underpin, the development of any society, you're actually looking at not only from the children when you start with civic education in primary schools, educating people about what choices and options are politically and what development means to the people, what good governance means to the people. We used to have that in the olden days when you have civic education. Now we don't have that anymore, so we can begin to see where the things went wrong. Then you talk about the community participation. Community participation is actually so low in Nigeria. It's only at the level of voting that people are actually involved, and in many cases people are even mobilized based on the wrong values, mobilized monetarily to go and vote. You have not seen community participation in the areas of making choices, in terms of people being able to choose those who will represent them in their different localities. What you have currently is that godfathers imposing people, in some cases, even people with questionable identity, on the locales within the country. The other issue, it's about, institutional options. What do I mean by that? You're looking at the aspect relating to political parties themselves. What are the options the political parties are faced with? What are the barriers, the building blocks, the blocks, that will create negative choices in a way that, we would end up with bad governance. One, the political parties are faced with one problem, the challenge of INEC itself when it comes to registration, the participation of people, individuals. In terms of the financial challenges, you must have offices in a number of states and all that. And when you look at that, that drives up the cost, for political parties. And where the cost goes up, then whoever can pay the bill fits the bill. And that is the problem which we have in terms of institutional. The other aspect which we have is internal party democracy. Do we really have that? The political parties themselves, do they actually believe in internal democracy in a way that it is functional and it is not just, a matter of paying a lip service, to one thing or the other? Look at, even up till now, we still have cases relating to Mr. Hay was substituted, Mr. B was the one elected, by the party primaries. How come Mr. Hay was the one that stood for election? When you look at the laws of INEC, governing primaries, INEC official is supposed to be at every single primary. So how come INEC is accepting the name of someone else, which was not validly nominated, at the primaries? So these are part of the blocks and the institutional weaknesses which are facing us on this very issue.
Let me take you back a bit. When you started your submission, you said, we used to have civic education, now we don't. And that's affected good governance all this while. So the question will be, we used to have it, that means there were people that were taught civic education. And most of them are the ones in leadership now in the country. So does it mean that they are not living out those things that were taught in civic education? How then do you expect the younger generation who don't have civic education to begin to practice those ethics that were taught them?
Yeah, it's correct. If you look at the generation of leaders currently ruling the country, there are people who one would have expected should understand a lot about governance, particularly when they had the benefit of civic education, lessons and all that. But what you see absence in them is the aspect relating to shared learning. We don't have leaders who would look at other environments and see how democracy operates and then agree by the rules of democracy. Because democracy is underpinned, by the rule of law. The moment the rule of law goes, then you would have a distorted democracy, and which is the problem which we have. Then we're not looking at how do you balance the interest of the people with the interest of political class. The political class in Nigeria seems to care less about the interest, of the whole country, of the ordinary people. So because the aspect relating to shared learning, which we have seen examples of so many legislators, traveling abroad saying we are visiting one country or the other to visit UK Parliament. What they go there to do is simply because of the ESTA code, not actually to get any knowledge, update their own knowledge about how modern democracy functions. So, and when you go into the past again, the civic education which many of them had was actually structured along that would suit parliamentary system of government, not the presidential system of government, the British system, not the presidential system of government. So therefore, the knowledge they themselves have, it's highly, in terms of civic education, highly inadequate. It's inadequate. This is the problem.
So let's look at how, is it possible to bring back, how do I say that, a reformed or a revisited curriculum for civic education to the point that even those in leadership can begin to be educated to the point so that they can begin to live out those ethics. I mean, the former CBN governor was quoted as saying in 2012 that 70% of the nation's revenues are spent taking care of about 1 million people. That cannot work to move this country forward. Is it possible? How do we turn that around?
He raised the issue of civic education. To some extent, I will agree with him. But my worry really about all of that is civic education is intended to imbue in the individual some form of nationalism and patriotism. But if you take it further, you then ask yourself, you look at the days of Awolowo, Ahmadu Bello, the Sardanas, the Okotie boss, and all that, who were the very first political leaders of Nigeria. To what extent were they able to drive the Nigerian project? All right. For me, I would think that they didn't get too far. Apart from maybe Awolowo, who was able to move the Western region a little bit ahead of the other regions. Yes, he also raised the issue of a parliamentary system of government. But even in that system itself, there were inherent contradictions that threw